Alrighty, everybody. My name is Andrew Lambright. I am a drummer, musician, and band leader based out of Philadelphia and New York. And I'm here with the wonderful bass player, musician, and just all around amazing person, Cameron Brown. And today we're going to be talking about the wonderful Dannie Richmond. But before that, a little bit more background. Cameron has played with a lot of the people who we consider to be the greats of the jazz, like Artie Shep, Art Blakey, Sheila Jordan, Jim McNeely, and Beaver Harris. And he's had also the great pleasure of playing with Mr. Dannie Richmond in the George Adams and Don Pollitt quintet. So, kind of from there, about Danny's early life, I feel like that would be an appropriate place to start. He was born in New York.
So Andrew, the Don Poland and George Adams band was a quartet, and during the 80s, that band existed pretty much through the entire 80s, starting with a tour in the fall of 79 and ending with the Mount Fuji Festival in Japan in August of 89. And during that time, Danny led a quintet, which he
Hmm.
also made me a part of. So I did three
Yes.
tours with Danny's quintet, and I don't know how many tours with Don and George's quartet, but a lot.
Yeah, I have that in there as well, that you had that, and just, yeah, a lot of great performances and whatnot for with him. But yeah, so he didn't really start playing drums, from my understanding, until his early 20s, and he actually started playing the tenor saxophone when he was young. He was born in New York, and then shortly after he was born, he moved to North Carolina, and then once he was a teenager, he moved back to New York again. So, is there anything else you think the listener should know about Danny Richmond's early life before we get to how he met Charles Mingus?
Um, I think his dad was a porter on trains, I think, or maybe even a cook on trains. I can't remember exactly. Um, but that's about all I know. I mean, the story, which I guess is true, is that Lou Donaldson used to tell this story, and they were at I think I can't remember which club, one of the little clubs in the van, in the village, which doesn't exist anymore. And Mingus was playing, and apparently he had just done a very up-tempo tune, and the drummer couldn't couldn't cut it, couldn't keep up with it. And Mingus, as he sometimes did, announced to the audience, "Can't nobody play fast tempos anymore?" And Lou Donaldson was in the audience. He's also from North Carolina with Danny, and he raised his hand, said to Mingus, "My homeboy can." And Danny got up on the bandstand and played some tune at a very fast tempo with Mingus. And as they say, that's all she wrote. Apparently, they were together from then on. I don't know how true that story is, but that's the story I heard.
That's that's great. One quote that I feel like really resonates kind of with that story a little bit is I believe Brian Priestley said that Danny Richmond became Mingus's uh right hand man, and he was to what Duke Ellington was to Harry Carney, more or less. So the relationship between them was a very tight dynamic from what this quote says. Would you have anything else to say
Well,
about
Mingus
the?
Mingus apparently would sometimes say that Danny remembered and knew his music better than he did. He would say, "Danny, how'd that go?" And I believe that because I was in Danny's band, we played mostly Mingus repertoire, and that was a huge thrill for me to be able to play Mingus's music with Danny because Danny just knew it so well and knew all the nuances about how it should be played.
Yeah, there's a lot of really famous recordings that they made together. The first recording that I found is the Mingus 3 album with Hampton Halls on piano. Definitely a lot of good stuff from there. I personally like just the overall energy that is kind of brought there because this is the first time recorded that these guys were all in a room together. So you can really feel that
Uh-huh.
sort of youthfulness in a sense of like, let's all get together and do this stuff. And it comes out
Right.
great on the recording. And then I also have that he did quartet in around the same period when he started with Mingus with Eric Dolphy, and I believe that's Ted Curson, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, that's my favorite Mingus record. It's called Mingus Presents Mingus, and it's just those four guys. Ted Kirsten, who I got to play with quite a bit, and Eric and Mingus and Danny, and it's just sort of you hear the unadulterated bare bones of I mean the two very involved compositions on there. Everything you could be by now. Sigmund Freud's wife was your mother, right?
Yeah,
Is a contrafact on the changes to all the things you are.
yeah,
And then the one called What Love, which is a ballad contrafact on the changes to what is this thing called love. And they're just it's just so gorgeous. And I don't know if Ted Curson ever played better before or after that, but he plays incredibly on that record. And of course, Dolphy is Dolphy.
yeah,
And the hookup between Mingus and Danny is just remarkable. And then they do Fables of Phobos on that record also.
yeah. I'd say probably the all the things you could be if Sigmund Freud's wife is your mother. It's quite a rhythmic trip in that when they get to the trading and they start going back and forth, and then
Totally.
they start from eights and fours and ones and all over the place.
Yep.
It's quite the
Yep.
rhythmic journey. When you were playing with Danny, what was it like trading with him?
No, I mean, it was incredible. It was the same, basically. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the band plays four bars and he plays four bars. But
yeah,
yeah. I mean, it was such a thrill to actually work on the Mingus repertoire with him and just try to, you know, I'm obsessed with drums because I think a bass player needs to be obsessed with drummers.
yeah,
In my in my view of things, the drummer is almost always leading the rhythm section. Pretty much have to let the drummer lead the rhythm section. And so then you have to, I have this other theory that nobody talks about, but maybe it's just my theory, that the fascinating thing, most of the music that came from Africa, uh, to Brazil, to the Caribbean, was based on the eighth note, all the different Brazilian rhythms, all the different salsa rhythms. But in this country, because the popular song of the day was the Great American Songbook, was based on the quarter note on 32 bar songs, right? So, and then you had this ting, ting, ka ting, ting, ka ting, ting, ka ting, instead of taka, 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 right?
hmm
And the space between those quarter notes, all for each, without rushing or dragging or whatever, but all the great jazz drummers interpret that space a little differently. So, it's for a bass player, I want to be with the drummer. I don't want to be trying to fight the drummer or dictate some other way of spacing those quarter notes. Uh, I mean, Danny and I, when the band formed, I knew Don Pullen, but I didn't know George Adams or Danny. And but Danny and I, we hit it off right away, both musically and personally, which was just a thrill. And but anyway, play with Billy Hart, play with Art Blakey, play with Danny, play with all these different drummers, and it's just a little adjustment always to how they're interpreting that space between the quarter notes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you almost always have to let the drummer lead the rhythm section. I think the two exceptions to that were probably Mingus himself and Horace Silver in the bebop world.
Hmm. When it comes to Mingus, would you care to elaborate more on how the rest of the band kind of had to go and follow him for chance?
I mean, Mingus was just such a force of nature, and he was people don't kind of sleep on the fact that he was a total virtuoso on the bass.
Yeah.
So he could, and he was so great, and I think Danny was a great partner with him in this, that they could push and pull the rhythm different ways. They could superimpose, different, like African 6/8 stuff on top of 4/4, and just do all kinds of beautiful and fascinating things with rhythm. But it was mostly Mingus who was, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously they were playing together, but I mean, it was the Mingus's forceful personality that kind of directed these things. And I think in Horace's band, Horace Silver's band, it was the same situation. His forceful personality at the piano was kind of directing how the rhythm was going.
Yeah. Very much those players were instigators. They had an idea and they liked to get the rest of the band to drop what they're doing and get on with it. So
Absolutely.
definitely always a treat listening to that, especially in the one Mingus recording on Pythanchronius erectus, if I'm pronouncing that right. There's a version of Foggy Day where it goes into some more freer sections and whatnot, and
Yep.
Mingus just absolutely takes charge, and he's like, "Let's go and mess around with this sort of interpretation," and then he lays down the quarter note, and the rest of the band's back in, and it's just
Right.
so great to have somebody with that. So with Danny kind of being the drummer in that situation, when you started to play on with him, did he have kind of a certain expectation after kind of playing with Mingus as to what he expects as the bass player's role in the band? Or did your role change compared to what Mingus's was?
Well, yeah, I mean, no, like I said, I was, my attitude was to play with Danny. So, which was very easy because Danny's beat was kind of in the middle. He wasn't on top of the beat like Tony Williams or playing a little behind the beat like Elvin did. Danny was pretty much down the middle, but I think it's a little bit more uh hard to talk about or hard to explain than that. To me, swing is uh, a magical, you know, 4/4 swing is just this magical thing that when it really happens, and when the bassist and the drummer are really, in a deep groove together, it's one of the most special feelings on the planet.
I think we can all attest to how magical it feels when you just
And
get there and
and
it
when there's
works out.
tension between the bass and the drums, and things sort of aren't swinging, you can feel that too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Also, when you were working with Danny and got with the George Adams and Don Poland Quartet, what was it like with some of your early gigs with that group? How was it like getting settled with starting to play all this music with everybody?
Um, it was a magical moment for me when as I said, I didn't know Don. I mean, I didn't know George or Danny. I got the call from Don. Don brought me into the band because he felt like, because Don was his musical appetites were more in an avant-garde direction than Danny's or George's. So he wanted to kind of be able to do both things, and he felt like I was somebody that had the flexibility to play more free music or swing. And I knew, I don't know how I knew, but I kind of knew that it was going to be really special. I mean, nobody could predict that band lasted for 10 years. When Danny passed away, the band had been going for about 8.5 years. We made like 10, 11 records. I mean, it was the band of my lifetime. So Danny was kind of the drummer of my lifetime in that sense. And then when I got to do 3 tours with his band and play the Mingus music, that was really incredible. Um, but I mean, what characterized that band was incredible intensity. Both George and Don were very intense composers, very intense improvisers. I remember one night when the band was 3 or 4 weeks old, something happened. I don't know what I had done or if I gotten tired or a certain moment in a tour. And George so looked at me and said, "Are you going to be really going to be with us on this?" I said, "Absolutely." But I think he was talking about staying with that level of intensity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds like quite an experience for someone figuring out
Oh,
all
I mean,
this stuff in
how
like,
old was I?
yeah,
I was about let's see. I was about 35. So I was still
yeah,
kind of a young bass player.
yeah.
And it was just, the thrill of a lifetime to get mentored by Danny and to be in that kind of plop down into that level of intensity and focus with George and Don was amazing.
One quote that I found from Stanley Crouch that kind of talks about the intensity is, I'm still fascinated by all the different ways Mingus and Dannie Richmond came up to playtime. I never had before and rarely had ever seen a bassist and a drummer dramatically affect the direction and intensity of the music.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was coming from Mingus, but Danny was a huge part of it. Absolutely. Sure. Good old Stanley. Ha, he was an incredible guy.
Another group that I have with Dannie Richmond playing in is with Mingus. It's a sextet, I believe, with Clifford Jordan, Johnny Coles, and Jackie Byard
And Dolphy.
as the
That
front
was
man.
that thing I
Yeah,
told you about that you already knew about. They
yeah,
they did a month-long, very, very intense tour, I think April into May of '64. And uh, that rehearsal on the stage of the Stockholm Concert House, which everybody should watch on YouTube. I don't care what kind of
yeah.
music you are, you should watch that because it's just an amazing document. I was at the concert that night because I
Oh
happened to
wow.
be an exchange student in Stockholm that year. And I remember Mingus playing that composition that he wrote, Meditation on Integration, with the bowed bass and the flute,
Oh yeah.
which you see him rehearsing on that YouTube video. I mean, I remember it. I felt like the duet between the flute and the arco bass like lasted forever, but I don't think it did. But that's what it felt like from the audience.
Yeah.
So
During
he could,
that perf My
what?
apologies.
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask during that performance, was there any other notable experiences that you had? Like, did you get to hang with the band at all after the set,
I
or
didn't, I was, I had just turned 18. I didn't know anybody. I was, I had just purchased my first bass because I played my high school bass before that. I bought a bass in January of '64, and in Stockholm, $200 German plywood bass. So I wasn't really playing. I, it's wild.
Yeah. Another performance I have listed was 1972 at Lincoln Center and also 1974 at Carnegie Hall for two of like it's a pretty big deal to get up into any of those stages to begin with, but especially to have someone like Mingus who was also a very controversial figure just like through his opinions and the way he went about his life. Having
Sure.
him up on those big stage, what do you think that meant for Mingus and the music he was trying to get put across?
Wow. That's, I mean, it was well-deserved recognition. I don't know what else could it mean. And
Yeah,
also, obviously, Lincoln Center and Carnegie Hall felt like Mingus was going to put some fannies in the seats. But I mean, yeah.
yeah. I also have some stuff on here about Dannie Richmond playing with some other groups. I have on here that he played with Elton John and Mark Almond. Is there anything from there? I found that he was on an album with Elton John called Tumbleweed Connection, and then did a
Wow.
few live performances and some other
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean,
from that era.
that
Yeah.
story is that believe in '69 or around that time, he and Mingus had a falling out. Mingus fired him. And then he said, I can get along without you fine, Mingus. Heck with you. Moved to the UK and made a lot more money than he was making with Mingus, playing with Elton John and Mark Almond and all those rock bands. I mean,
Yeah.
Danny was like, take a day at a time. What's happening? Oh, okay. Those guys want me to play with them. How much is it paying? Oh yeah, I'm there. And I think in '71 or so, this is just my memory. The dates could be different. Mingus called him, said, "I need you back, Danny. Can you come back?" And he did.
Wow.
That's my
So
understanding. Yeah.
there was no like resolution of whatever they had to do. It was just Mingus was like, I need him back, and he just called him.
Well, I'm sure whatever it was a silly argument in the first place. I mean, those guys were, such deep brothers in music. I can't imagine anything that could really come between them in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I was curious is because you got to spend so much time with Danny and be around him and not only see him as the musician he was, but for the great person he was. What was one something about life or music that you learned from being with Danny that really resonated with you the most?
I mean, he was a very positive person, always looking for the bright side, always looking for, how can we make this better? And he just took a liking to me, and I just, he invited me to be in his band, and he was just a wonderful guy. I don't know any other way to put it. And musically, he was like when Don or George would bring a new composition to the band, and we played it for a week or something. We used to play 3 or 4 weeks every year at the Village Vanguard in the '80s, which was at that time the Vanguard was 3 sets a night. First set at 8, 8 to 11, 11:30 to 12:30, 1 to 2. That was the
Oh boy.
schedule at the Village Vanguard. That was the time when New York actually really was the city that never slept. And so when they bring a new tune, I almost felt by the time we'd played it for a week every night, I almost felt like telling them, okay, you guys need to make Danny a co-composer on this tune because he had shaped it. and done so many great things to enhance the tune. And that's what
Was
he did
this
with.
was this all from the drum chair, like just through the things he was playing, or did he like actually sit down with the band and suggest
So,
arrangement
so
things?
Andrew, I hate to tell you, this music comes from Africa. It comes from the drums. I always tell students the drummer is the most important person in the band. I can play my ass off. If the drummer's mediocre, the whole general feeling of the music is going to be mediocre. And the music, the drum have such, first of all, they're laying down the groove, and then they're doing all the shading and all the transitioning from head to solos, solos to solos. I mean, Billy Hart is like master of this kind of stuff. Just sometimes the drummers are really, throwing bombs at you and stuff, or they so many. Where's that? I can't find it right now. But anyway, there was a writer who reviewed. Billy was playing in four different bands at the Detroit Festival one year, and this drummer described what a great jazz drummer can do, and it's so many so many different ways to enhance things or shade things or you know uh, help with transitions and just shape the music. Drums are, sorry guys, you got a lot of weight on your shoulders. Got a lot of responsibilities in terms of the total gestalt of the music, the total feeling of the music. And Danny was just a master, and I think that probably developed with Mingus and those early days. I don't know if Danny had all those kind of chops when he just came up and was able to play a fast tempo with Mingus, but I'm sure Mingus had a huge effect in terms of, of encouraging Danny to use all his creative powers to shape a tune.
Yeah, definitely. A lot
Yeah.
of creativity you can
Uh,
hear in Danny's playing, whether it's just keeping time or some sort of little fill or comment he's trying to interject there. It's always just something that feels right, but never quite what you would expect.
there you go. That's the uniqueness of each guy and the uniqueness of each guy's creativity.
Yeah, definitely a lot to be learned from Danny Richmond and the various endeavors that he took part in, and also the things that he was a leader in as well. So,
Absolutely.
all around, just a very positive and impactful force within the world of jazz and the world of drumming. And if it weren't for Danny Richmond, that sort of creativity that it happens throughout the drummers definitely would not have continued to be highlighted throughout the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, new guys come along all the time, but there's not a lot of them. There's not a lot of really unique drummers
Yes,
compared to other instruments, I think.
yes. And then one last thing as a little aside, I was
Sure.
aware that Danny Richmond was an impeccable dresser, and I
Oh
heard
yes. Oh
from
yes.
Matt that he taught you a few things about style as well as how to fold your clothes.
Oh, Danny was a great mentor about how to be on the road, how to travel, how to fold your clothes, how to travel light, all that stuff. Absolutely. Yeah, he was great. He was so skinny and such a skinny neck, so he always wore an ascot. Let's see, I got one record cover here. This is ascot,
Oh my gosh, that's
and
great.
here's a this is an amazing album cover. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah,
That
that's a great album.
also somebody made a painting of him with his ascot. Yeah, no, he was a definitely a fashion plate. Yeah.
Yes.
Very.
Always great to hear about those things that the musicians do in their time off the bandstand.
Yeah, yeah.
Always interesting to see what people are up to. But besides that, I think this is a good place to kind of leave the interval. Would you think so as well?
Sure, sure. I hope I was had some good contributions. And if you have any other thoughts, reach back out.
All right. Thank you so much, Cameron, and thank you for everyone else at home watching. We really appreciate your interest and enthusiasm towards the music, and I look forward to providing you all more with more information about different musicians and different topics within jazz and other music things. So, in the meantime, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and whatever you have planned, and we'll talk again soon.
And thanks so much for doing this documentation, Andrew. Needs to be done. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure.